And away we go. Welcome inside the Sporting Tribune today. No time to mess around. October is here. Arguably, let's be honest, the best month of the year. Not just because of Halloween, not just because of the nice weather and the leaves, but the fact that football is in full swing, basketball is coming, the MLB playoffs, and then the WNBA finals are here. And of course, the background is Las Vegas because that's where we record the show. And we are on the precipice of the biggest WNBA finals of all time. No hyperbole, no prisoner of the moment. This is a matchup with Hall of Fame coaches, literally MVP and Hall of Famers on both sides, 3-point champions, all stars. It is going to be crazy. Two juggernauts, two super teams, whether they like it or not. So we need to get straight into it. It's Adrian Hernandez. This is the Sporting Tribune today, and our WNBA Finals preview is here. We check in with Mark Schlinder of WNBA.com. All right, let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. I have been waiting for months for these WNBA finals to happen. Granted, you know I'm here in Vegas, so I'm a little biased, but before the Aces and the Liberty tip off, we need to check in with someone who I've had the pleasure of talking to plenty of times, but for the first time, joining us here on the Sporting Tribune today on the Believe Sports Network and Fubu Sports, goes by the name of Mark Schindler. And look, basketball is life. And this man takes it literally. It doesn't matter if it's women's, collegiate, men's, overseas. It doesn't matter. If there's a basketball hoop involved, Mark knows about it. Insightful, works for WNBA.com. Also has his podcast as well. They've got Now That You Need to check out. Mark, how you doing, my friend?
Adrian, I'm good, bro. I appreciate you having me on. It's good to connect again. Back in the place where we both began, Cleveland, Ohio, right now. So living, man. It's been, as you know, it's been a busy start to the day. So we've got a lot going on.
Yeah, 100%. And before we get into the WNBA finals, you said there's a lot going on, which one of the bigger things is expansion. It's finally here. It's not just being talked about, and it's been announced formally. San Francisco, the Bay Area, Oakland becoming the 13th team in the WNBA. What's your reaction to it?
It's awesome. I know this has been in the pipeline for a while. It's been kind of expected to be Bay Area for the last couple of days. So to get the official announcement and the official setup in Chase Center from Joe Lacob and that ownership group was exciting. I think, especially when you look at like how everything's balanced out. I know I saw some people going like, "Oh, well, what about getting another East Coast team?" And honestly, like this kind of balances out more. Like there are a lot situated in the East and Midwest, and it makes sense to bring another to the West Coast and particularly when you talk about the facilities that they're going to be able to have, or not even going to be able to have is the wrong way to put it. The facilities that they will have, and the arena they're going to be playing in are top notch. Like it's you're not just putting them in a random spot. That's part of the importance uh, of doing this right, is making sure that you get situated with a good ownership group and a place that's really invested in that ownership group out in the Bay Area very much seems like that.
And I wasn't aware of Joe Lacob's, interest in the things that he's done in the women's game. So that's very positive to me. I want to play the flip side to this in the expansion talk. Like, obviously, we're kind of in a revolution, which is amazing that the fact that it's the Liberty and the Aces, because that ownership group, both of those ownership groups have invested so much into the teams and treating them properly, like other professional sports leagues. At the same time, here in Vegas, Aces win the championship, and for months, simple things like, yo, I can't buy an Asia Wilson jersey anywhere or a Kelsey Plum. I can't even actually, I shouldn't even say anywhere. Directly on the team shop of the team. You go on the website, you can't get it done. Obviously, flight and travel and some of those things have always been discussion points. And I guess the easiest way I could put it is, why are we renovating, or why are we putting a pool in the backyard when we need to make sure that the house is good?
Yeah, no, I think that there's some truth in that. I think to not counter arguments, but to add on top of that, I think a really substantial part of this to me that hasn't been discussed yet, um, it's about travel. Like one of the things that's gone under the radar is that Seattle has to travel more than just about anybody, considering how far away they are. Putting a Bay Area team right there, it doesn't seem that much farther, but that's 4 or 5 hours north of Los Angeles. It makes a difference. That's like a huge difference in terms of what travel looks like. So I think when you are clustering it together like that, especially talking about how the schedule is expanded out, and I've seen people asking about it, like the schedule is not going down. We are not going to see the schedule
Ever.
decrease again. That would be shocking. So I think to me that's, and especially when we're talking about, like, obviously it hasn't been confirmed yet, but it seems like, as you know, Kathy Engelbert talked about today, Portland, they're still securing what that's going to look like. But it seems like pretty much 99% that Portland will be the 14th team. So when you cluster those two together, I think when you talk about how that ends up looking scheduling wise, because you have some teams that face one another 3 times a year, others that face one another 4 times a year. Those teams are going to play each other 4 times a year. That cuts down travel costs. That's important for continuing to build out some of that. Just building out the West Coast in general with that. There's already a huge fan base for women's basketball in Portland in particular, and just women's sports in general in Portland. And then obviously Stanford has a huge base on the West Coast there as well. So just from that aspect, like, I think that is something that is really crucial, and why these two markets are being located and pinpointed right away, even though I understand what you're saying, because I think so much of building out more of that is increasing the revenue and getting increasing eyes, increasing everything with this, because you're adding on. I'm probably not doing the math correctly, but technically you're adding on 40 more games. It doesn't end up being exactly 40 more, because like they have however many home games there are. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's confusing in my
Math is
head. Math is
overrated,
very
but yeah, I
difficult, but
got you.
you're adding, yeah, it factors in, but I agree. Like, there are still things that very much have to be taken care of now, and I think that is really relevant when we're talking about not expanding to Ontario yet, because I think that that's something that the league isn't ready for, particularly like what you just mentioned with fixing some infrastructural things before there's expansion like that.
And even the pay of the players and things like that. And we could go on and on. But you talk about being crucial for the league, in my opinion. This matchup here in the finals, as we move on to this matchup with Vegas and New York, like, I love the fact that it's like a West Coast team going up against the East
Mm-hmm.
Coast team, the East versus the West. Like, there's drama, there's a story to be told, and obviously there's greatness on the court on both sides. Just the fact that we're having this matchup, like, how important is it for the league in terms of there's going to be more eyes than usual, in my opinion, in this finals matchup than even last year with Vegas and Connecticut.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because in some ways, I know that it has worn on the fans who are like extremely invested. Like, I think that it has been a lot. Like, there's obviously since the moment these teams formed, it's been a talking point. I think both the teams are tired of it to a degree in talking to them. Like, I know they hate the word super team, and I am kind of with them, but that's what the branding's been. And I think, to me, granted, I am biased because I didn't really grow up with the W. Like, it's only been the last 4 or 5 years of my life that it's been like, something that I'm fairly around, and obviously working around the league now. But I think this is the most that I've ever seen people who I know aren't necessarily W fans, that are like, they casually just know about the Aces and Liberty, and they're going to watch the finals. And that matters. Like, that's important. I think, as much as being true to your for lack of better words, I'm going to use an anime term, for you got to be true to your otakus, the people who are like there from the beginning, who are the blood and bones of the league. But also, you don't have revenue without casual fans. Like, that is what it's about. You have to get eyes on, you have to get people consistent, not just eyes on, consistent eyes on, people consistently caring. And you can't grow people into being diehard fans unless they're casual first. Like, it is really hard to just bring people in and make them automatically like, hey, you're a super fan. Like, that doesn't happen. So I think it's huge. Like, this is the viewership numbers the entire year have been crazy. Obviously, the Sun Liberty, that final game, which was happening on a Sunday while other sports were going on. Believe it or not, you can play two sports at the same time. Who would have thought? Like, that did astronomical numbers compared to what it's been looking like. The entire season's been like that, and I expect. I mean, especially like when I was on call with the broadcasters yesterday. A lot of people have been like, "Oh, well, why are games separated Sunday to Wednesday? That's so far apart." It's all about prime time. You get ABC both nights, and that is huge. Getting ABC on Sunday, ABC on Wednesday.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
so
It's not just the Sunday
it's
treatment. No,
about
that's huge.
getting prime time. So, like, I think, again, it's the little things like that that are extremely crucial in continuing to build this thing out. So I think that just can't go under the radar.
And I think that, like, an important part is no matter how great something is, if there's not a story that doesn't get people invested in having something to follow along. And I know that they hate the super team like moniker and it's been used incessantly this year. But to me, this is the Cavs and Warriors 2017.
Yes. No,
And
honestly,
like
like, that's such an apt comparison. Like, I think that, there are definitely some differences within that. But I think in terms of the way that it's been drummed up and talked about since the start, like, yeah, it's been like that.
And when we look at these two teams' journeys to the finals, is there anything that sticks out? Obviously, greatness for both teams and the domination that they've both had. But is there anything that sticks out to you in terms of seeing these teams adjust and flourish throughout the season?
Yeah, I think, part of what is interesting has been, even with both these teams getting the super team moniker, like, I think the idea of super team is you just think, oh, well, talent, and, like, thinking about, like, the NBA, with even in the NBA when it was the Brooklyn trio that was awesome. Like, that team found a really awesome balance of ball movement, and their offense was awesome. Like, but the Liberty and Aces have done that to an even higher level. Like, the Liberty, since the All-Star break, have been, not arguably, I mean, they have been the best team in basketball since the All-Star break. But then the Aces have hit their point, and they've been the best team in the playoffs easily. Like, you can pinpoint and be like, oh, well, they had an easier path, and I say, okay, but at the same point, they still blew out everyone in front of them and were dominant. That matters. Um, I think when you look at just the way that both these teams are playing and the way that they've gotten here, how many things that they've had to go through, like, obviously working in Candace over the first 15 games of the season, then her going down and having to deal with that, and then kind of restructuring around that. And then for the Liberty, it's been trying to figure out how to coalesce all this together. And I still think that Sandy Brondello hasn't gotten enough credit for how difficult how difficult the job that was. Because it's easy to look at, okay, remember when they lost by 15 to the Mystics in the very first game of the season, and then here they are in the finals. Like, it's been a really cool ride to watch, especially too, like you mentioned, with the Aces, watching their growth and development from last year, because they went from a team that was incredible offensively and got the job done defensively. They weren't perfect, to this year being dominant on both ends of the court, and that is a huge step up. So I think, like, I mean, there's just so much that you can pinpoint and be excited about from both teams in terms of the way that they've adapted throughout the year.
And I think for the Aces, the past couple years, one of the question marks has always been depth. And this year was no different, and to me, exhaustion as well. Just winning the championship, the things that they have to do, media responsibilities, um, the lack of players on the roster, and all these things. But as of late, I think they've only played 5 or 6 games like the past 30 days.
Yeah.
So it's helped them out. And you bring up the dominance in the playoffs. Granted, that game 3 in Dallas was closer than they expected. Um, and like that's been a lot of dominance, right? And then on the flip side, for the Liberty, Connecticut was not an easy path to go through, and they've had some struggles, and they've had to be in games. So as we talk about the path of getting here to the finals, like does that work in the Liberties? Is it in their favor because they've had so many close games and stuff compared to the dominance and rest that the Aces have had?
Um. Wait. Sorry. Can you, like, does that work in favor for the Liberty?
Like who are you? Who does this favor? The fact that the Liberty have had to play that like through the playoffs and still like they haven't had complete domination, as opposed to the Aces kind of having the easier path.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. No, I misunderstood it first. I think for me, um, I don't know if it necessarily benefits either team. Like, to me, what's so interesting is, as much as New York's bench played a big part in those later games in the season when they did beat the Aces, they were kind of a non-factor against the Sun. Um, I thought I mean, they had some good moments against the Mystics, but against the Sun, they really weren't a factor. Like, I think they really only went like 6.5 deep for most of that series. Um, so I think that'll be interesting to see. And it was interesting too, because me and mutual friend Nikias Duncan, um,
The
yeah,
legend.
we're working on a series right now. His piece just went out. Mine just got is going through editing right now. But talking to the core four, so Chelsea, Asia, KP, and Jackie, And it was funny because I believe it was actually Asia who brought it up, talking about like how a lot of like, yes, things get made up about our bench, but like a lot of this is because no, dude, like we want to play. Like they want to play as long as they play. Like it's not like obviously like it is fair to bring up things about their bench, but I think my point that I come back to, everybody in that starting lineup is so incredibly well conditioned. They've had time off. They're professional basketball players. I think you can bring up like, okay, once we get to the end of this series, if it goes 5 games or something, maybe that becomes a bigger thing. And I do think when you talk about different looks and whatnot, that matters. But when you're just talking about the rhythm that they're in as a group, how well they're playing, how talented they are, I think to me, I always just come back to, because I used to be like you got to have depth. Like if you don't have depth, this and that, like you do need depth, to be fair. And I think that's why having a player like Alicia Clark is so essential. You have somebody who gives you some versatility and gives you that extra rest and gives you the ability to play different ways. But also having the best 5 on the court is what matters. It's not about having the best 8 on a roster on paper. It's about having, and this is not a shot at the Liberty. That's just saying, because I feel like I hear so much, and I don't mean this from you, just in general. I feel like I see so much about them not having a bench. I'm like, they went 36-4 this year without 34-6 this year without a quote unquote bench. So it's just, we had all these same problems last year, and I'd argue that they're still deeper this year. Like obviously missing Bay hurts without getting into the off court stuff, but like I think it's pretty easy to argue that AC has been more important for this team than Bay was last year. Bay missed most of the season with injury. AC played almost the entire year, with 6th player of the year. It was my vote for 6th player of the year. And I think when you look at her elevating them on both ends of the court, you can't undersell that. And it goes without saying too, like all 4 of those players are better this year in the starting lineup. I think you can, like Kia gives them a look. It'll be interesting to see how things play out and how they try and work around things with Kia, because we saw that in the Dallas series a little bit. But this team is just so good, man. Like my biggest thing that I come down to is it's very hard for me to nitpick a team that was arguably the best team in WNBA regular season history and coming off a title too.
Without Candace, which is
Yeah.
they did all this restructuring. Yeah, it's crazy. And pardon the simplistic question, and we're gonna get to the series prediction here in a minute, so get ready for that. But what do you expect from Asia and Stewie? Like, is there going to be another level somehow that Asia can get to? Do you expect a little bit more scoring from Stewie? Because there's been some off nights where she hasn't scored 20. Not saying that she's had bad games at all, but there hasn't been those outbursts. So what do you expect this series from both of them?
Yeah. I think what's so exciting is that not that I don't know what to expect. I know both players are going to play like mad, and I think what's so important with both of them as well is like even if they're not necessarily scoring well, like they are so impactful in everything else that they're doing on court. Like, yeah, Stewie did not have a great offensive series, but she was awesome defensively. The passing was there. Like she's always going to be a focal point that you have to worry about on both ends. And same thing with Asia. Even in the game against Dallas, when she was very adamant, like, yeah, that cannot turn over the ball like that ever again. But she was still awesome defensively. She's the reason why they won that game. Like, I think when I look at what that could be for them, it'll be very interesting to see, because I feel like they might not even like they're going to match up, but so much of what both teams do defensively is not just about playing one-on-one and finding other ways to operate. I think what'll be more interesting to me, based on how these teams play, is going to be like, this is getting like niche, but like the team really started to do a lot more, especially after Candace went down, of Asia coming off screens. And that's just like, that puts a world of hurt on guards. And I think like when you looked at some of the things that the Sun were able to do against New York's guards and trying to strain their defense, which to the Liberty's credit, they worked around, they got better at, they found new schemes throughout the course of the series. But I think the Aces are better positioned to try and put them in more advantageous positions for them to take advantage of. And obviously that goes both ways. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. But I think to me, that's what I'm interested in from Asia. And then from Stewie on her side, like, I think a lot's going to come down to me. Like, I straight up would not have her. I don't know if I would have her guard Asia or not. What's interesting is like somebody's going to be on Kia, roaming, helping off, and being impactful at the rim. And what that ends up looking like, how teams end up playing with it. Because again, like the Wings never really figured out what they wanted to do with it. I think they could have blitzed off of her as well, because that's a thing where Kia's gotten so good at flipping the ball or just screening and opening things up for players coming off the ball. But like how the Liberty try and find ways to try and counteract some of the, that non-spacing that the Aces get out of that spot is going to be interesting.
Yo, for those listening to us on the radio, we're coming back with Mark with more, okay? For those watching right now and Believe in FUBU Sports, let's keep this going. By the way, Mark Schlinder joining us, WNBA.com, also his podcast they've got now. Go subscribe, rate, do all that, and we'll get your plugs in too. And real quick, not to be a tad bit more simplistic, is Stewie and Asia going to be the most important players in this series for each of their teams? Like to win this series, not who's the best, but most important in trying to win this title.
I hear what you're saying, and I think to me, I would go the most important. Like obviously, yes, you can do like the best players on the team, but the most important players to me are, I think Alicia Clark is incredibly important in the series because, like we talked about with lineup versatility, being able to do different things, she's essential. I think she has to have a really good series, and then Courtney Vandersloot on the other end. Because I think, like we saw in that series against the Sun, what was so big in them winning game one was they were able to keep Courtney Vandersloot out of the paint, really force the Liberty offense to bog down, not really get any drives, and open up their shooting and playmaking. And I think if the Aces are able to do something similar, or how the Liberty try and work around that or focus on getting her on the paint, is going to be huge, because I think they are just such a different team when they get that going. And when they don't have that going from her, they really don't have anybody else to create that. So I think those are my two X factors / most important players in the series.
Yeah, man, I'm getting like, Mark, pardon me, because like I'm just getting excited.
Dude, I can't wait. We still have so many days to wait.
I need Sunday to be here. I'm trying to watch this series. With all that being said, though, it's the moment of truth. Series prediction: Aces, Liberty, finals. Who wins?
This is tough because I've gone back and forth on it. I think right now, if I had to choose, I'm going to go Aces in 5, just because I think
we air in Las Vegas. Is that why? I want your honest.
Well, yeah, having it there in Las Vegas would be cool. I'll have to try and pitch my boss to get me out there, but mainly just because I think the Aces have been here before. It's a little bit different when you've got that experience. Like obviously there are multiple players who have won titles on the Liberty, but I just think it's really hard to win a title in year one when you have all of your pieces just coming together like that. So I would probably lean the Aces right now. But game one's going to be huge.
I can't wait. Before we get you out of here, brother, get in all your plugs because you're everywhere, my friend. The floor is yours. You got the whole shot clock. Let them know where they can find you.
Well, first off, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's always good to connect. I hope that I'm able to get out to Vegas soon so we can meet up. I think for me, the only thing I really want to plug, like, again, my Twitter over at MG_Schindler. I did a pretty big feature. It was like my big thing that I did this season on DeWanna Bonner and her career and her life, honestly. And that's pinned to my Twitter page. I recommend going and reading that because that was just a really fun thing to do. And a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that one.
And that's it?
That's all I got to plug right now, yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna put all the plugs underneath you, right under here. Look, man, you're one of the best in the business, and thanks for all you do. As someone who wasn't able to be at as many Aces games this season, I felt like I was just as tapped in through some of your work. So, Mark, as always, it's a pleasure to have you, and thanks for making time for us, friend.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Boom, there it is. Much love to Mark Schindler for joining us with our WNBA Finals preview. And speaking of those finals, me alongside the great staff at the Sporting Tribune, we got you covered full 360 when it comes to the WNBA Finals. Plus, this weekend, college football season continues. USC, UNLV, and more. Full coverage on those. The NFL gearing up for Monday Night Football as the Raiders take on the Packers at Allegiant Stadium. And on Monday night as well, the Los Angeles Lakers take a trip to Sin City, their first preseason game of the season. We will be in the building for that as well. Dodgers getting ready to start the NLDS. There's a lot of stuff. It's October, it's here, and the Sporting Tribune is here for you. Be sure to follow us, our social media down below. For the whole team, I'm Adrian Hernandez, and this is the Sporting Tribune Today.